Another week of preseason football, another rookie quarterback showing out. Drew Allar had the big game last night, 10 for 13, 153 yards, 2 touchdowns, rushing TD, 154.8 rating. Pittsburgh scored on all three of the competitive drives he led. Those were 80, 89, and 60 yards. His first completion went 74 yards. I don't know if they even had vertical offense in James Franklin's offense last year, but he looked great in this game. What do you make of it?
Yeah, very interesting player, just from the standpoint of he was hyped up significantly early on in his college career and things kind of faded a little bit. But I think it aligns with our sort of commentary with the Beck episode of like, he's played a lot of big time football. He has a lot of experience, and you throw these quarterback darts and just see what happens. And, if you're the Steelers, Aaron Rodgers basically said, this is it for him. This is his last year. You got to be excited about Will Howard even played pretty well in the game as well. But there was so much of a narrative on the Rams and how controversial it was to take Ty Simpson, and these decisions by teams like the Steelers and the Cardinals, like these should not be considered controversial at all, because, if these guys are even good backups, I think that would be like a potential, bad case scenario for some of these guys between Beck and Allar. Like, it's still a great investment, and it was worth the risk that they could end up actually being like a potential starter. So super excited if you're, a Steelers fan. They had Bernard had a bunch of plays as a receiver too. He actually had another touchdown that his foot was like just barely out of bounds, but in terms of like production from the rookies and production just from the kind of the whole team, like they really look solid, and it's kind of an exciting time for the Steelers.
Yeah, people forget that he was talked about as a potential number one pick at one point, and that offense was kind of a mess. I mean, they all got cleared out. Then he ends up with the injury last year. When it isn't a total shock to see him playing well. It was obviously a bit of a projection because they literally just did not go downfield really at all. I wouldn't be surprised if he had the longest catch and runs of his career just yesterday in that game, more so than anything he did in college, because that was just kind of the way that Penn State offense looked. Staying with the quarterbacks, Vegas, a little bit of something about that situation. Kirk Cousins, Fernando Mendoza, both of them looked really good yesterday. Cousins was 5 of 6 on his one drive. Led a touchdown. Mendoza was 10 of 16 for 97 yards in a TD. He had a 79-yard TD drive. And then another one that ended with a missed field goal. Klint Kubiak's first game with them, they look pretty solid. It's obviously preseason action, but they got to feel good about what they're seeing there.
Yeah, I think what happened yesterday is definitely not going to resolve the, starter battle there at quarterback, but it's great for Raiders fans to see both guys, get into the end zone. And I'm a buyer of Kirk Cousins stock. Like, I think that he was maybe a little bit oversold these last couple of years, but especially when he was with Klint in Minnesota, like they had a great season, when he was the play caller, and he looks very natural out there. Klint does a good job at getting guys open, doing creative things with the receiver splits, with the blocking. I saw some stat that they used like 4 or 5 different personnel groups, like right off the bat on offense. And like, that's going to be a Klint thing. Like, they've been experimenting with 22, which is interesting because everyone talking about 13, 22 is like highly similar, but it actually at times can present even more problems for the teams that want to try to match nickel, because you just have a fullback in there that can, really kind of create these 2-back runs, and you got receivers that could potentially block. There's some interesting things there, but totally, there was a couple moments with Mendoza that he mentioned himself that he kind of wanted back, but like in terms of a couple of those throws, you're like, this is something. Like, this is why he went number 1 overall, and I think it's pretty exciting for them. And then even they drafted Mike Washington Jr. a little bit later in the draft, and he had probably the best run of the night, where it was like a 53-yard run, looked very explosive. He can really move. He's a big guy. Like, I see that player as one of the biggest sleepers this year. And I think, Klint last year, and I think over his career has had times where he's rotated the backs a lot. And, even though they have Genty taken 6th overall, like, based off what you saw from Mike Washington Jr., you have to think like he's going to have a role there. And as an analytics person, I've always kind of found the at the running back position, some of the best kind of sleepers in the draft are just simply the guys that are heavy and fast. Like that combination is like a rare combination. And some of those guys sort of get slept on because of criticism of things like pass pro or catching or, vision. But at the end of the day, like if you're big and fast, like there's a role for you in the NFL. So like, I think that he, just based off of what you saw yesterday, I think there's some teams looking around the league thinking like, did we overthink this one, kind of letting him slide a little bit? But you have to think that things are kind of, the arrow's kind of pointing up with the Raiders. They had some struggles on defense. That's going to be something to keep an eye on. I believe the first 4 or 5 drives that the Cardinals scored on, which was a little bit alarming from that standpoint. But, I think that there's totally going to be reasons for optimism and excitement. And even on the other side, we saw the Cardinals had a few guys make some plays too. And it was our first chance at seeing Love at running back, had some really exceptional plays to kind of make something out of nothing. I think he ended up with 14 touches for the game, which was a little bit higher than you maybe would have expected. But you saw flashes of why he went, in the top 5 picks. And then even Marvin Harrison Jr., which there's been a lot of discussion about really kind of needing to take that next step this year. Like he had a touchdown on the first drive, looked pretty impressive. So I think everyone kind of discounted the Cardinals, and through 2 preseason games, there's some things going on there. Yes, it's the preseason, but there's some reasons to think hey, this is not maybe a team that's projected to be 31st or 32nd in the league. So I think, there's reasons for optimism on both sides.
Draft value aside, I would buy stock in both those Raiders running backs. For my money, I think Klint is the best designer of run game in the NFL. And the way he marries it to play action, I think is among the best that I've ever seen. People talk about, look, he was with the Saints in 14, and people talk about Kamara, just, he can't do anything. He's washed. Just 2024, the age 29 season, he had a career high in rushing yards, and it was his highest per carry since, I believe, his age 25 season. He's very good at designing run game, and that was behind a terrible offensive line. So I mean, there's obviously the Genty argument for the draft value and all that stuff, but I would be shocked if both those guys don't have great seasons playing in that system, because I think he just makes it so easy for them to succeed by the way he designs it. And I think Cousins is really good, a good play action quarterback. I think it would make life easier for Mendoza. They did a lot of that at Indiana. So I just kind of like the way all those pieces fit together. It just feels like there's some stuff there for them to have a cohesive vision. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how quickly Fernando gets up to speed. And it'd be wild if Kirk ended up in the same situation 2 years in a row. Let's go to San Francisco. Stribling, maybe the most controversial draft pick in the whole entire draft, the most talked about one. He ends up having 7 catches on 8 targets for 63 yards just in the first half, was picked 33rd overall. The immediate production kind of, it's preseason, but that kind of quiets that down, at least for now.
Yeah, I'd say, the fantasy football guys that are following this, if there's one player that probably live had their, average draft position just surging last night, it probably was him in the standpoint of, that's a very rare occurrence to have that sort of production in preseason, especially if you're not playing the whole game. There's been reports that he's looked great in camp. And Kyle's obviously been able to sort of game plan a lot of production out of some of the receivers at times. And, I think that there's always the added incentive of you were criticized heavily for the pick. And it's do the coaches actually have a little bit more of a mentality of hey, we're going to prove everyone wrong here. And we're going to try to maybe even feature the guy more. I think that I've been a part of times where there's been a little bit of that sense that the public criticism is significant enough that there's almost a double down attitude of well, we're going to prove them wrong on this. And so, but go ahead.
Can we do a little inside baseball here just on how these opinions get formed though? Because I work the draft. I'm looking for information all the time. And I just find it so ironic the way people react to some of these picks, because there's 2 things here. A, if John Lynch quit his job and just started doing draft rankings on the internet, everybody would follow it, and his thought process would drive the thought process behind where everybody gets ranked and everything. Like the groupthink on that is insane. The second piece of this is if a team actually really likes a player and they don't tell anybody about it, people don't necessarily move him up. But if John Lynch was leaking to a bunch of people, hey, we really like this guy, this is where, he's being underrated, nobody's talking about him, you would see that name move up all the way through it, and then everyone would be like, oh, that's a good pick. I hate to burst bubbles here, but I don't think a lot of people are actually going out ranking people independent of information and just doing it in a pure, isolated, away from groupthink way. And if you protect your secrets, I don't know, you can leak that stuff and picks don't look crazy if everybody's talking about it. Oh, he's a late riser. Like you see these storylines at the end all the time. And I think a lot of times that's somebody that's about to do something that would be considered unconventional, starting the leak to protect their thought process so they don't get criticized about it. I think if you're strong enough to not say anything, you can surprise people, but then you do get criticized. But I think if people were auditing where their opinions are coming from, they wouldn't be maybe so sharp with it because they should look at how they're actually doing their own rankings.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And there were some bizarre comments in the week leading up to the draft on some of these players, and it was like coming out of left field. It's like, what is going on here? There was a safety that was like at one point maybe considered a third or fourth round guy, and you've got the biggest media members in the country saying this guy, there's one GM saying this guy is the best tape they've ever seen. Like, that's the same draft that Caleb Downs did, like, who was incredible. And it's like this, like those sorts of comments. It's like, what exactly is the intention of that? And if you believed that to be the case, why would you ever have a social media account with 10 million followers that's followed by every fan and every team put that out there? Like, what objective would that have? Because obviously, if you believe a player that's projected to go in the third or fourth round is that good, don't tell anybody to take him. And then if you're right and he's a Hall of Fame talent, like, you look great, and all you potentially could be doing is signaling to somebody else that they like didn't actually evaluate the player properly, or you are highly likely to take the player and you want like some media apparatus to support that decision and sort of, justify it. So it's very interesting how what does come out, what doesn't come out. I always respected, like, Belichick wasn't ever going to let anything come out. He could care less about the consensus ranks. And I like using the consensus ranks to some degree. Like, I think it's a little bit of a stretch to not use them at all. Like, there was times where New England took guys in the like late second or third that people had as like seventh rounders. And I think maybe that's pushing it.
De'Zhaun Stribling.
Yeah. But at the same time, like, there are times like where, like they, quote unquote, maybe reached on a guy and the guy did incredible things for their team and, helped win Super Bowls. So I think it makes for more interesting, entertaining, like, draft processes when nobody shares anything.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a mystery.
It's just like Mayock back in the day would do something and then you'd see everybody change their rankings. And now Dane Brugler's kind of the guy, if he says something, it's just, if Jeff Ireland all of a sudden is doing it, the stuff they're criticizing Jeff Ireland for, if he were in the media doing it, he would be kind of controlling the groupthink because he'd be at the top of it. And it's just such a weird process to me when we look at it. Anyways, moving on here. Another one, Cam Ward, second-year player, 5 of 12 last night, 57 yards, no TDs, no INTs, 56.6 rating. They had a nice drive, the opener, 11 play, 95 yards, but overall was kind of so-so first game in Dable's offense. You take anything from it?
Yeah. So, for everyone that gets excited about the rookies playing well, I think there's a signal in, starters not playing well too. Like that, you shouldn't entirely discount that either. And I think a reasonable person could say, like, you wanted a little bit more out of Cam Ward in that game. Especially, I believe they basically were rolling mostly starters and their opponent was not. But, like, timing was off on some of the throws, and it seems like it's going to potentially be a little bit of a work in progress on some things. Definitely like a contrast with, like, what happened with Drew Allar, what happened with Kirk and Mendoza. So just something to keep an eye on. Like, I had some different stats of, like, consecutive incompletions for all these quarterbacks last year. And I just like, quarterbacks that kind of went through these long stretches where they threw a bunch of incompletions in a row. And like Cam Ward was like up the list. If I did 3 in a row incompletions, 4 in a row, 5 in a row, like he was right there at the top. And I thought that was kind of interesting because that's not exactly a good sign, looking ahead. But, they've got a rookie receiver who's a difference maker. They've got some promising things that they just have to kind of iron out. But in a division with some teams that are pretty impressive, between the Jaguars went 13-4 and Houston is a Super Bowl contender, and the Colts went with Daniel Jones healthy, looked like a Super Bowl contender too. Like that, there could be some more growing pains for the Titans, just in that sort of division right now.
It's been interesting too. Like a lot of the reports out of New York is that Dart's kind of had a uneven camp, so that's going to be interesting to see when he's playing too. Just from my perspective, I was watching Tyler Shuck kind of not have a great camp, and then they have these joint practices, and he looks absolutely incredible against Jacksonville. So sometimes that doesn't mean anything, but yeah, the against another opponent, I mean, you got to take all the data and kind of see where it goes from there. I would still buy stock in Cam Ward, but there was stuff last year where you can see it going either way. So yeah, definitely going to be fascinating to see how he develops in year 2. Now this guy, I think me and you would have been fighting all draft season because I made the unanalytical, I had the bout of lust with Jeremiyah Love, man. I just thought he was like one of the best players I've ever watched in college. Was just completely blown away by him. I would have just done the dumbest thing ever and drafted him incredibly high if I was running a team. But he did look great last night. 11 carries, 58 yards, made some stuff happen on his own. The clips are all over Twitter. The spin moves, the hurdles, the change of direction ability. He looked amazing. He really did.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I'll remain team analytics where like it's like in my brain there's like a cognitive block that you're just simply not allowed to take a running back top 5, top 10, top 15, top 20. I have a little bit of openness to the teams that take the running backs in like the 20 to 32 range. And it's only if the guy is really good, maybe like the top guy in the draft, and your team has a great offensive line, and the quarterbacks, if you're drafting there, you're almost always like a good playoff contender or Super Bowl team. But even then, I still wouldn't take a running back in the first round just as like a blanket rule. But yeah, like that, he's got just a record amount of guaranteed money. I believe when Genty was taken, the guaranteed money was, I think, Genty's guaranteed money was 100,000 less than Barkley, which kind of seemed a little bit extreme at that time. And then the Jeremiyah Love contract, because he was taken third, and because like the year over year increases and everything, the guaranteed money is like the most by far, or whatever it is, at least when he was taken. I know that we just had a couple more extensions go out for running backs, but yeah, it's going to be super interesting. Like, I'm intrigued by what Mike LaFleur does for his run game, because the Rams had a nasty run game last year, and it was not overly complicated. It was heavily like these duo concepts. It's something that is pretty easy to kind of apply with a new team. You don't necessarily need to have like the you don't need a zone read quarterback. You don't, like, it's just pretty much get under center and like get big guys in the game and get some double teams and kind of get going. And I could see a world where, especially early on in these games when they want to try to, keep the game close, because they have a brutal schedule regardless. Like, that division is, I've been through that, where like you step into it as part of a new coaching staff in like a crazy stacked division. And even though if you do things right, like, it's tough, it's really tough. And I think people have to be patient with the Cardinals, just because like they're basically going up against the Super Bowl champs that blew everybody out most of the season, the Rams, who had the best offense in the NFL and just added Myles Garrett and are by far the Super Bowl favorites, and then the 49ers, who are obviously, a perennial Super Bowl contender. So I could see there could be a world where Jeremiyah Love's, the production is not maybe ideal in terms of the run game, just by like yards per carry and whatnot, but then he's ripping off like 8 catches a game as they're losing in the second half, and he's taking dump offs for like 26 yards here and there. And like, I think I could see him being like a fantasy football superstar this season.
My thing with him was just kind of this player in this draft where there wasn't necessarily a ton of great players at premium positions. Like it felt like the one where you bend on the roll a little bit. But I am curious, like, does your valuation on running backs change at all? Is the passing game kind of goes down over the last few years? Running's become a little bit more emphasized. Defenses are starting to get a little bit heavier. Like, do you adjust kind of your thinking on how you would value a running back if you're in those rooms, like based on how the league's being played, or is it just kind of stayed true, tried and true, kind of your whole way through?
I would say that the data has been so compelling for so long. Do not take a running back, that even if there likely is some directional boost to running backs over the last couple of years, it might have made it so like never take a running back in the first 50 picks to like, okay, you could arguably take one at 35. Okay. Like it's still in the range of like really just when you talk about the dollars and the contracts and just strictly like the surplus money on the contracts. I think I would argue that actually what took place with Derrick Henry and Barkley is just a further indicator to not take them, because both those guys actually hit free agency and like were signed for like very, very reasonable deals. And then just like one team won the Super Bowl and Derrick Henry looked unstoppable, and like the contracts were like very affordable.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's this new kind of wave of these adding 4 void years to the contracts. And I think fans should keep an eye on the Falcons, because they had a guy named Bryce Johnston who was basically the cap wizard of the Eagles, and he left to be senior vice president and handle all the cap for the Falcons. And the Falcons just started handing out all these contracts to that in some cases people thought were a little bit high, but they are carbon copies of the Eagles contracts, where they basically maximize the void years, they maximize the option bonuses, and it's going to allow them to field a roster that goes way above the cap. And it's really leaning into the cap inflation and borrowing basically from the future from an interest-free standpoint. So, keep an eye on some of those Falcons contracts. They keep handing them out. Basically every guy they could give a deal to, they did. But it's allowing the cap hits for the running backs to be much more manageable. So the Eagles did the same thing, with Barkley essentially to some degree. And, Bijan it's the same structure where you're not getting dinged with the $25 million cap hit right now. When you do have your big cap hit, you may be in a scenario where the cap hit or the cap hit as a percentage of the total cap is so much less that you're like, whatever. And then now you saw what the AJ Brown deal, what the Eagles did is like, they had the void years on the contract. They decided they were going to get out of it. And they leaned into this whole idea of, okay, we're going to take this massive dead cap hit, but we can June 1 we can push it past June 1 so we can spread it over 2 years. So you may see some more of this happening, especially as there's going to be more of these cases where these void year contracts don't work out. And when they don't work out, the team is going to it's going to be like this. That AJ Brown saga was like crazy because it just was so delayed. But they were adamant, like they cannot do this no matter what until that June 1st kind of cutoff. But you're going to see more teams doing these like June 1 cuts, June 1 trades, so they can do these multi-year kind of dead hits. But it's made the running back cap hit much more reasonable, because like it used to be like, okay, we're taking money away from our offensive line or receiver group, but now it's like, no, we can actually just pay all of them. So it's like the pie is larger.
The thing a lot of teams are doing with that now too is they're using the 50% down roll with the way they write it with the void years, so that some of that money can be movable if they want to trade them too. Like when they write out these voids and they come up. Look, one of the things a lot of people don't want to admit with that either, they just can't get their head around, is that it's a strategy that can go on forever. Everyone's always like, well, there's going to be a bomb. There doesn't have to be a bomb if you are constantly doing this as a strategy and never relent and just decide to never pay the bill. Like you can keep it going into perpetuity. It's doesn't have a deadline. Like you can just keep stretching and keep getting new credit cards and basically doing charge-offs forever until you don't want to. The Saints were one of the pioneers of this, and the only reason it stopped working for them is because there was the COVID year and the cap dropped, and that was not something you could plan for. But if you have a plan and the cap keeps going up and it's like, all right, well, we're going to have this huge hit here when the voids accelerate and now we owe this guy all this money, Okay, but the guy over here has a $1.5 million, that you got his salary down to the league minimum. If you're just doing that forever and you have a strategy and you have an actual plan and you're looking at how things fit together, like there doesn't have to be an end to it. Like the Eagles could do this forever as long as they have an owner willing to outlay all the cash necessary to structure your contracts like that. The only limiter here is like the Raiders couldn't do it because they're cash poor. A team like the Eagles isn't. Arthur Blank owns Home Depot. He can do it forever. Like the limiter is just actual cash is the only thing on it.
I'm done with the cash poor argument at this point. I don't know if you saw the valuations come up, all these franchises, like how many of these teams are over 10 billion. So like there's and this is Mark Davis. This is nothing to do with Mark Davis, but like he's a willing spender. And now you see them spending, they spent like more guaranteed money than I think anybody, at least for like non-quarterbacks this offseason. But
all right, well, I'm hating that. I'm using the lazy storyline, but like
the reason I bring it up is the fan bases should be calling out these handful of owners that still will not do it and saying, give me a break that you're cash poor. The league just wrote you a $450 million check on top of all the other things. The money, you look at the international money, you look at all these different markets, the year over year growth of the team valuations, you can dip into private equity. You can it's an excuse for some of these owners that are hilariously cheap. And they want to just like, I brought this up on Twitter recently and like it got a buzz in some places. Like if you're an owner and you will not do the void year stuff, and you don't want to spend the cash, you don't want to do the option bonuses, signing bonuses, then every single one of these owner meetings, you should be complaining that it needs to get banned because you are totally so far behind fielding a competitive team. And if you want to go ahead and trot out a roster that the APY combined of the players on your team are like 280 to 300 million, and then the Eagles and the 49ers and some of these other teams are 450 million, it's just simply, it's like when Alabama or Georgia, plays against a lower tier, FBS team, like they simply just have more money. It's like everyone complaining about the Dodgers. They have more money. They have a better team. Like sometimes they'll lose, but over the life of a season, like they're going to win more often, all things being equal, just because when you're lining up you got two receivers making 25 million a year. You've got, three offensive linemen that are great players, and you just go up against another team and they have, one or two guys on their team that are real like offensive difference makers. And it's just simply over the course of, 150 snaps that occur in an NFL game. Like it just ultimately ends up being the difference when you have better players.
Yeah, maybe and if you don't want to spend the money, just sell the team, I guess. Like get your money out of it and let somebody else invest in it. Speaking of owners that don't spend a lot of money, the Bengals, Joe Burrow went 5 of 6 for 39 yards. The sack, though, was the thing that kind of stood out. Being under center was a storyline up there very early on in that game. You saw him take one. What'd you think?
Yeah, so that's been a narrative for a long time. Like I would say if you just zoomed out and looked at coaches that maybe didn't buy into analytics or like what the data is saying over a long period of time, like I think a reasonable person could conclude that Zach Taylor kind of is in that realm of like year after year, there's like some areas where it's like, hey, running's more favorable here. Well, they're one of the top pass teams, or play action usage. He's one of the lowest play action usage guys. Like everyone's going under center. He doesn't really want to do it. Like there's been these like patterns here where there's some questions about, do they not have the staff? Does he not care? Like, does the quarterback not want to do it? Like what's kind of going on there? But it seems like, especially in light of the Rams leading the league, being a heavy under center team, they led the league in scoring, and then the Seahawks won the Super Bowl and they were an under center team. It sounded like all the messaging from the Bengals was like, hey, we're going to try this. We're going to work on this. And, I think they had some decent plays in the game from under, but then they also took a sack. And like, I think that's, at the end of the day, you want to lean into like what the coach is comfortable with and what he's like, what you're coach is good at, what the quarterback's comfortable with, what the offensive line coach is good at designing. Like, it's not as simple as everyone just saying, hey, line it, like what Schwartz said. Like, you don't just say like, hey, we're going to play big nickel now and now we're a good defense, like, or we're going to play too high and we're just automatically going to be good. Like, you have to kind of fit it to your team, fit it to what the players are comfortable with. And there absolutely is like there's a lot of nuance to the under center game and like the timing and footwork, and even like Mendoza, like that's been the big discussion with the Raiders, is like he never did it and he has to kind of learn all of it. And I think I'll never forget that, you know, people talked about Ben Roethlisberger just really he wasn't an under center guy. And like over his career, like he could absolutely zip it from gun and like he looked very comfortable there. And people would kind of advocate they got under more, and it just wasn't kind of who he was in terms of at least like the under center play action pass game. So something to keep an eye on. There's definitely, if like your protection rules are a little bit unclear, or like you don't have the best answers of handling like blitzes from under, like you definitely can expose the quarterback to higher sack rates, because some of these quarterbacks don't feel comfortable like turning their back to the defense and all of a sudden it's a nickel pressure or cat blitz or whatever, and there's a corner coming in their face or an unblocked player for whatever reason. So something definitely to keep an eye on. Like I just put out this post yesterday that, you know, basically if you just take between the quarterback and the receivers, you could argue that the Bengals kind of have the best setup in the league in terms of QB receiver combo. I don't even know if it's that much of an argument against it, but like they got to figure everything else out. But like they've had some good pass offenses. They just kind of, you know, they still haven't made the playoffs recently. And like they got to kind of figure that all out. And it's good to see him practicing it. You just don't want to see your entire franchise take a sack in preseason ever. Like that's not great.
Yeah, definitely not. All right. A lot of stuff to go over. Preseason's rolling on. We're going to be doing these breakdowns all throughout. Appreciate you guys watching. If you aren't subscribed to the channel, subscribe to it now. Leave a comment, tell a friend, post it on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you post, Snapchat, whatever it is. Share the show. Appreciate everyone who's watching. We'll talk to you next time.